Okay, I am thrilled to really bring everybody together for our third uh, subject matter expert guest for this term, for the October term here at Embry-Riddle Worldwide. Today, we are joined by Mr. Eric Schwartz, who is the manager of FPLAir, a Florida power and light company, and NextEra Energy's aerial intelligence response group. Eric has worked for the company for 10 years, and he's also responsible for forecasting, piloting, and implementing cutting-edge technology in the unmanned space to be used by the company. He's served in other roles as well, including quality deployment lead, smart grid and innovation manager, reliability program manager, and delivery assurance lead. Prior to joining FPL, Mr. Schwartz was an engineer for Emergency One, a leading fire apparatus manufacturer, where he designed aircraft rescue firefighting trucks, or ARF trucks, and K-Rain, where he designed irrigation sprinklers. Mr. Schwartz holds 15 work patents and 9 personal patents. He earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Central Florida, an MBA from Florida Atlantic University, and is a certified Six Sigma Master Black Belt. In his spare time, you'll find him pursuing entrepreneurial interests, designing children's products for mothers on the go, and spending time with his family. In addition, I've had the pleasure to work with Eric on a prior coordinated effort on behalf of the state of Florida for an entry for the UAS pilot program, the IPP. And we are both on the AUVSI Florida Peninsula chapter's board of directors, where Eric will be serving as the incoming VP starting in January. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Brent. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to, can you disable the sharing, Brent? And then I can share my presentation.
Sorry,
or can you enable it?
Yeah,
it says
that's
it's disabled.
Okay, I'm making you a co-host, so that should give you ability to share.
Perfect. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So pleasure to meet you guys. And so my name is Eric Schwartz. As Brent said, I'm the manager of FPLAir. And we have multiple responsibilities, and we'll go over most of the the drone stuff today. And then afterwards, there should be plenty of time for questions. So under my team, we are responsible for anything unmanned, and that's whether it's a drone, a robot, like a rover or spot, and we're also piloting autonomous vehicles and other stuff at the utility. But today we're going to talk about the drone side. So under my group, we have 3 verticals that we are in charge of. So one is what we call blue sky, which is a day like today. Here in Florida, no storms and just a regular work day. And that's run by my team under Heath McLemore. And we are in charge of and responsible for any drone that is taken off from FPL NextEra, which is our parent company outside of Florida, their property, whether it's a vendor, a supplier, or an internal employee. And just to give you an understanding, and you'll see it in a minute, we average about 30 plus flights. And when I mean flights, missions a day. And a mission can have anywhere from 1 to 15 to 20 flights. And so we'll go over that in a second. We also have a special program because we're an electric utility, we have union employees that we've been working with the union and the crews that go out into the field to use small, say 2-pound Anafis and Skydios and small DJI drones to use for investigation purposes. And then we have a vertical for our R&D group that we have what's called a partnership for safety plan with the FAA, a PSP. And we've been working with them under 2 areas, a drone in the box for highly automated beyond visual line of sight, and Teros, which is a large-scale UAS. And then lastly, NextEra Energy, which is our parent corporation. We are working with them to do and use LiDAR to go out and fly and map pre-construction properties for solar and wind farms to be able to help engineering and permitting and construction better understand the layout, topography, hydrology, and all sorts of survey needs. So on the side of what we call Blue Sky, our operations team, it's built of 4 people, and those are on the left. But on the right, I really want you to see is what people don't realize. And my team, FPLAir, and FPL as a company is not one to go out and put news articles out and say brag and so forth. But we are probably one of the largest and busiest drone fleet companies in the world. And if you look at our evolution, this year alone on Tuesday, we broke 100,000 flights for FPL NextEra. So today alone, we had 50 pilots out in the field across the country flying, averaging 10 to 20 flights per day. So you can imagine how many, doing 500 flights a day or even more, you can imagine potentially, how many, flights, 100,000 plus. And it's been a quick journey. From 2018, we had 1,200 flights, and 19 was 5,800, 22, 22,000 plus last year. And so we're really excited on the opportunities and the value. And in all of those flights, I would say 90 to 95% of them are line of sight, pole inspection. And they're just going from pole to pole to pole, looking at the overhead equipment on the pole, taking pictures of different angles, visual and thermography. And then another 10%, give or take, is solar panel thermography, looking at hot spots, dead spots, and then pre-construction for the LiDAR. We just built out a futuristic FPLAir command center that, our goal, and we'll go over it, is that we're working on what's called highly automated beyond visual line of sight with the FAA, highly automated BVLOS, which means that we want to eliminate the pilots in the field. Currently, we have a 2-mile EVLOS, or extended visual line of sight BVLOS waiver. What does that mean? It means that we can fly with a 2-person team locally at a location out 2 miles radial, so 4 miles diameter. And if we wanted to go extend it out another 2 miles, every 2 miles, we have to then have another visual observer every 2 miles. So we could fly 100 miles out, but we would have to have 50 visual observers, or remote visual observers, in constant communication with each other. So what the goal is, and what we've been working on is, and I'll get to it in a minute, and you'll see it, is with our drone in the box program with the FAA, is with a radar, a localized radar there to be able to act as the detect part, not the avoid, but the detect within a certain mileage range. And then we can then have the RPIC, who is remote, do the avoid mechanism, which would be go safe, land, or maneuver around incoming uncooperative traffic. As I said, we have an RS pilot program, which is called Restoration Specialist. Those are single electric workers that are out in the field doing investigation tickets. And so we've realized using drones as a tool in the toolbox is being able to have them have this drone so they don't have to go in people's backyards. They don't have to go and climb into vegetation areas that are inaccessible and so forth, to understand what's out and what's not. And then from there, they could fly, understand it, and then call in the vegetation team or the crew to then fix the problem. So next is the FAA Partnership for Safety Plan. And so the goal is, beyond visual line of sight and highly automated beyond visual line of sight. We are in the process of re-signing our PSP for another 3 years, which is really exciting, and to continue to build that relationship. So on the right-hand side is a Percepto drone in the box. It's an Israeli company that has built a very advanced and well-built, managed, and reliable UA, which we are working with them to go through the type certificate process with the FAA right now. And what this map is talking about, the roadmap. For those of you, if any of you minus Brent that are in Florida, most likely if you're in, the Daytona area, you are a FPL customer. And so we have over 650 substations that feed and transmit power and reduce it around the state of Florida. And so our goal over the next 7+ years is to put one of these drone in the boxes in every substation for us to be able to do daily flights and assessments, being able to capture video imagery, and then use image recognition, change detection to be able to monitor our grid and be able to predict when equipment is going to fail, or potentially if it has already failed, to help reduce the time that the customer is out of power. So our next step with this is a map of West Palm Beach. And this is a map of where we're going next for our pilot, is we're going to be installing 13 drone in the boxes, and the circles are radars. And the circles are the reach of the radar. And we're going to be building out our own, with 8 radars or 9 radars, our own radar system for the north part of Palm Beach County. This area just feeds over 1 million customers. And we've got a decent amount. And the red lines are the actual lines that will be flying and monitoring. And then this brings us to the second half of the second part of the Partnership for Safety Plan, the PSP. This is a Teros drone, which is manufactured by a company called Navmar Applied Sciences, NASIC. And it is a kit plane from a company, Sonex, which built it. And it's a 2-person kit plane that has been completely redesigned and remodeled and rewired for a UA. And it is, as you can see here, a 39-foot wingspan, 50-gallon tank. We're looking at about 20-hour flight time. Range is about 1,400 miles. And it's got a 600-pound payload capacity. And our goal with this is to map the entire state of Florida, our entire infrastructure, with LiDAR, visual imagery, thermography, hyperspectral, multispectral, to look at all sorts of different things from build a 3-dimensional twin of our network, and also our vegetation issues and other stuff as well for solar and so on. I'm going to attempt to play, and let's see if it works. Can you guys see the video?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
coming through with audio.
Good. It might be a little delay, but so this is just a little brief of what the Teros looks like, and in the end, you'll see it fly and take off. We've put about 21+ hours on the UA right now. It's up at Griffiths Air Force Base, which is one of the 7 test sites, and it's been up there flying and getting all of its initial hours for an experimental certificate, a SAC-EC, and then we will be bringing it down to Florida to fly here and build out the hours under the SAC-EC in Florida to build out the type certificate over the next few years. And so another part of our program is storm response. And for those of you that live in Florida, know, hurricane season can be, scary sometimes, and a busy one, like 2019, or, this year we got very lucky with potentially, one skirting us from a tropical storm. But, our team is the first in and the first out. And what I mean by that is we've built out over the years since 2016 and 17 with Michael and Irma, the lessons learned of how can we use a drone as a tool to understand potential issues before a storm comes in, 72 hours ahead of time. And then once the storm passes, how can we use it to get into inaccessible areas like flooded areas or areas that are blocked by vegetation or debris that you can't get through? We can then fly a drone over that or beyond visual line of sight and be able to then identify and let the local operations team know how bad it is on the other side. What equipment do you need? That way, once the debris or the flooding is subsided or removed, we can get in there and fix things and get power back on much faster and safer for our customers. So over the years, we have a network of 20 plus member team, pilot team locally within the company, but through contracts and vendors, we have the availability to pull in over 300 pilots if needed around the state of Florida and on the outskirts like Georgia and Alabama and Louisiana and so forth. And that is the end of my presentation. So I will go out and stop sharing the screen and any questions.
Excellent. Well, I'll get us kick-started on questions, walk us through a few things, and then I'll turn it over to the class. So in regards to unmanned system technologies, what are some of the most recent advances or breakthroughs that you personally find exciting related to what you do at FPL?
On our side, I think there's two areas. One has just happened and one we're still lacking. And I think that will be a game changer for what we see as the future. So the first one is, the improvement and the continuation improvement of localized sensors on the drone, like DJI has the RF sensors for collision avoidance. And, Skydio has done it with visual cameras. So you can't fly at night with the Skydio for visual avoidance, but you can at least with a DJI. We've tested trying to fly that into our lines, into fences, into walls, into vegetation, into trees, and, it truly works. And with that, that really helps take out guesswork, right? You're trying to get as close as possible to a spot and be able to really understand, is this bolt rusted out or is this, and so forth. And so I think as drones get more advanced, the simplest thing of just collision avoidance and helping the drone get close enough but not collide into a obstacle and then crash has been a huge and exciting advancement over the past, say, 2-3 years, with DJI kicking it off and so forth. Skydio now can do bridges and, other stuff, but they're still missing that kind of nighttime, with say infrared or some type of RF technology versus, the camera. But I'll tell you the one game changer, which no one's been able to solve yet on a under 55-pound UAS, is true radar detect and avoid. Iris has, their camera system, their infrared camera system, but it's still not 100% validated by the FAA. We have it as well on the Terrace as an option for mitigation, but it's still not there. Someone really needs to make a Echodyne, a Fordham, but compact enough that can go out 2 miles, scan 360 degrees on the UA itself. And with that is going to be, I think, the number one game changer for, say, beyond visual line of sight and being able to really expand and blow up the industry.
Excellent. You mentioned how DJI tools really excel in areas when it comes to remote detect, or rather sensing at night, and really keeping you from inadvertently causing issues with pilotage. We've seen here in the state of Florida and across other states some recent developments in the legislation relating to public agency use of those products, as well as any that aren't on a approved list. Like at the federal level, it would be the SUAS blue list. Yep. Have you been affected by any national, state, or local regulations like that, or any others adversely affected or created challenges that you have to now deal with? And And have you also seen any issues, maybe state to state, as you guys have a broad coverage area?
On our side, since we are an FPL NextEra is an investor-owned utility. So we don't take state funds on that kind of sense, like say Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a utility, but it's a cooperative that's run by the government. So they have to, abide by, say, that SUAS blue list. There are some what's called FERC-NERC, which are federal regulations for transmission and power generation, that they've started RFIs or inquiries about who's using DJI or Chinese manufactured drones. We've made a personal goal, as much as we love DJI, and I would say at least, it used to be 100% of our systems were DJI, right? DJI still is the only platform for our regular blue sky pilots that can capture a visual and a 640 thermal imagery, which is what our reliability and a lot of our internal customers need. And so we can't move to an Anafi thermal, with Parrot, or move to an Altel or someone else, because no one has that high res or the 640 thermal camera capability. And so that makes it, not to say difficult. At this time, there are no regulations for private companies unless you're getting, federal funding. But it's, also, if you really dive into it, you look at it from our side, is critical infrastructure on the side of 99% of critical infrastructure is on the side of roads. It feeds the building you're in right now, Brent. It feeds all of your homes that the students are in. And you can go outside just like any foreign national or spy and take a picture of any one of those poles, right? So as long as we follow what the DoD has, recommended for, not using company laptops, not, doing the tracking, flying off grid and so forth, which we follow and do, we continue to abide by that. But we are waiting, we like the Skydio, and, we like the Anafi thermals. We just bought some Watts Innovation prisms for LiDAR. So we're trying to expand away from DJI, and our goal is to eliminate and eventually scale out. But they're the most advanced and they're the cheapest. And when we have to make a budget from an investor-owned utility, my bill, just like Brent, your bill, pays my salary. And so you have to be, you can't just spend money to spend money. And so, and also when you prove out the safety and the technology, DJI hands down is still, 95, probably 90% of the world, drone fleet and commercial fleet. And so it's hard to challenge it. But, we are seeing some other companies go down that route of going to other non-Chinese manufacturers, and it's not easy as well. It's still, it's either really small or really big. And there's not that in the middle that can do two payloads and that really can do what FPL is looking and needs at this time.
I can understand that. I mean, DJI they've had a number of different positive impacts. I mean, the price point has made this highly accessible and usable within field. Additionally, they've done what I would term the amplification of the technology, meaning they've built a comprehensive, cohesive, connected infrastructure that allows you to get end-to-end coverage. We really need to see, as we as a country move forward with this, if we're going to start to implement this, more or less you have to follow these vendors, off an approved list. We need to start making some domestic investment in US production, because really that's what's lacking. We don't have even what we had 10 years ago. If you recall, we had a lot of what I would call garage-based developers, folks just working in teams of 3 to 5 in as low budget, low rent as they could get, but they were coming up with some creative concepts. We don't really have that going on anymore.
No, I mean, you still have, you have onesies, twosies, right? Parrot's coming in with the Parrot USA up in Boston, using that as a manufacturing facility. You've got Skydio. I'll tell, and you don't really have anyone else. And even in that sense, right, Skydio is going after a certain market, right? And unless you do what, DJI did and just go after the masses first and try to get that, kind of coverage and that fan base, it's going to be tough for, unless the government, like you said, goes in and really invests in a few with grants and so forth. But I mean, look, that's how a lot of these companies started. Skydio, Precision Hawk initially with their fixed wing, and Watts Innovation, and a handful, right? It's all kind of startups and mom and pops, and starting with friends and so forth. So, I think there's going to be some opportunity. It's not as easy, right? And I think until they finally lay down the hammer and then also see that they have to reinvest, which then should help.
So one of the things that we as graduate students, and that's what I have two classes here tonight. One of the challenges they have is staying current in field and understanding, what's the value of the material that's in, say, peer-reviewed published journal articles versus trade, magazines, versus some of the stuff that might be in just really rapid out the door stuff like SUS News. What tools or resources do you use to stay informed? And what are some of the challenges of just sifting through the massive volume of material that's out there?
Yeah, now that's a great question. And I mean, I guess you have to take it all with a grain of salt, right? I mean, you have articles, when people like, back in January of 2021, when the article was written by Sarah and American Robotics for the first highly automated drone in the box, and how they did it. 90% of it was false. It was a fluff piece, right? It was a marketing thing. Same with BNSF, and their highly automated BVLOS, and that's why you kind of never see like Excel Energy and FPL and some of the ones that are really, say, pushing the limits. We don't like to, number one, not to say it's competition, but we share information, but we share it privately with the people that need to know versus, going out and trying to just get business and news. And it's tough because you've got, of course, all these companies that need that marketing and need that opportunity to then be able to get more investors and become clients. And I think the best opportunities are really, going to just some trade shows like AUVSI, the Drone Expo in Nevada, at Las Vegas that they put on, and then there's another energy specific drone conference in Texas. But conferences and listening and watching panels and webinars is, I think, the most value and the most real you're going to get versus reading a news article or following Patrick Egan and watching him go after Precision Hawk and the FAA, right? So SUAS News is great just to stay current, right? Hey, what's out there? Who's doing what? Maybe reach out or so forth. But I mean, and we still do that, and I do that all the time. But then when you call these companies, it's smoke and mirrors. And not to say it gets frustrating, but you still need to do it because you need to stay current, right? You need to stay ahead of the eight ball or whatever the term is. And so that's why I say you just got to take it all with a grain of salt, right? I'm not one to reading white papers or reading articles, on like the full research study or so forth. Look at the abstract. You can really see if it's worth it. But for the most part, I think, looking at, SUAS News and just keeping current on, on the article, like, what recently what's it called? The Walmart article, right? With Zipline and Drone Up. I mean, you go to Drone Up's website and it's one page and it's absolutely nothing. And it's just like, they say they're operating 50 miles beyond visual line of sight, like Zipline is, in Arkansas. And it's, there's yes and no's to that, right? There's visual observers. There's a lot of different things that go along with a lot of these, that they don't tell, right? And so, but I think you still need to stay current and look at everything, but just understand and take it with a grain of salt and call and say, hey, if you're interested, what was this? We'd like more info and so forth like that.
Outstanding. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my students. I see we've got a number of hands up. So Eric, just to give you some background, these are graduate students most of them are in the Master of Science in Unmanned Systems degree. Many are professional, experienced aviation experts in their own right. They come to us with sometimes with substantial history in manned aviation experience, in maintenance, operations, as pilots, etc. So the first up is Christian Kang.
Thanks, Brent. Hey, Eric, before I ask my question real quick, I just want to say your use case really resonates with me. I got my start in UAS with the State Farm Catastrophe Team, and one of the first places we got deployed was to Paradise, California after the PG&E debacle. So your use case and scoping a lot of your your utilities and staying ahead of the game, that really does, and it might be lost on a lot of people. But speaking of which, I wanted to ask you, because you are flying pretty pretty close to the public and in private areas, and over people's backyards, I would imagine. What kind of public perception have you seen in Florida with your operations, and are you required to then notice, or how do you approach that?
No, great question. And that's something that keeps me up at night, almost every night. So in the state of Florida, there's a statute 934.50 that does not allow UAS to take video or imagery of people's property without their permission. But there's an addendum in there, F or K, that says if a utility has an easement or equipment on someone's property, the utility can take imagery of their said equipment. So on that side, it's hilarious, right? You could set a helicopter, 500 AGL, 1000 AGL, 20 AGL above someone's private property and take all the pictures you want. But if you do it with a drone, technically privacy law. Now, it was built around the idea of, warrants and all that kind of fun stuff as well. But on the side of notifications, there is no statute at the state level or local level. But what Florida Power and Light has done, because we serve over 10.5 million customers in the state of Florida, we're the largest utility in the state, and we serve at least over half of the community on the volume side. And so with that, what we do is 10 days prior to any feed or overhead line inspection, we will call with an automated call, email, or text message, whichever way the customer has predetermined through our company because of privacy laws of communication. We send them a note, call them or an email, and say within 10 to 5 days, we will be in your area doing drone assessments. And we tell them how we're doing it, what we're doing it. We send them to our website, fpl.com/drones with an S. And on there, it has all sorts of questions, pictures of what we're doing and so forth. And then we also provide a callback number. They can call back customer service if they're concerned or want to complain about, this is my property, I own the airspace above my house and you can't fly there, everything. And with that, if the customer service rep can't answer or solve the problem, it gets routed to my team. And then we will call the customer back and talk with them. On average, we call 20 to 60,000 customers a week. On average, we get one call back a week that we need to go call and talk to the customer directly. And, it's been great. We did a whole focus group about 3.5 years ago, because what we were seeing was we've never had a drone completely shot out of the sky where it's fallen and crashed. But we've had 3 that have been shot at and have bullet holes in them. We have video of them being shot at. We've had rocks thrown at our pilots. We've had them verbally abused. We've had guns pulled on them from, people coming out on their property, and we're not on their property, we're on the street. So we did, for safety reasons, we did a whole focus group in areas in both, Florida is a very Hispanic area. So we did English, Spanish, technology, and not technology people. And we did 7 focus groups of each. And we got some really good feedback from what should the automatic call out or message say? What should the pilots be wearing? And what should they put, signs and so forth. And since then, we've seen a dramatic drop in callbacks and also in what we call customer or members of the public situations. So it's definitely something that's, you never know what type of day someone's had. But as you can imagine, we get some pretty fun and out there in left field calls.
Sounds like you guys really put a lot of stock into that. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's something that's paid dividends well, over and over again.
Outstanding. Next up is Charles Stiles.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Eric. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. Hey, Charles.
Okay, great. Hello. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, first of all. And my question kind of dovetails on Christian's question. So a little bit about myself. I'm an instructor pilot at Whiting Field. I'm not sure if you know where that's at. It's up in the vicinity of Milton. It's like northern Pensacola.
Yep.
So we fly everything up there from T6 turboprops to helicopters. So I guess it was about a month ago. Oh, I'm sorry. And additionally, I'm also with the wing. I'm one of the wing safety officers. So about a month ago, I get a text message saying, "Hey, by the way, we're flying drones along the power lines in your area." So I was like, "Oh, that's nice to know." Specifically because our helicopters utilize the power lines as, I don't know if you're familiar with what force rules are, but it's basically rules of the road and how we get in and out of our airfield. And so they're normally flying 700 feet AGL above the power line. So I was like, well, drones have to be above 400 feet. We're flying at 700 feet. Somebody makes a mistake. So my safety spidey sense started going off. So I did. I reached out. I went to the website. I contacted FPL. I tried to talk to some people to figure out, what is a good way as another pilot to track where these drones are actually flying. Like, we don't necessarily need to know they're at this location, but hey, we're going to be doing surveillance along this section of the power line, and I think that would have definitely been helpful to mitigate some of the risk and anxiety that people are having getting this mass text message. So I just didn't know if you could talk to. Are there any plans on how people outside FPL can track where these drones are flying, other pilots? Is there anything in AirNav or ForeFlight or some other kind of app that we can utilize?
Yeah.
I have a second question, but I'll let you.
Yeah, on that one, no, it's a great question. And, and listen, I'm actually going right now. I've got 30 plus hours. I'm getting my, 61 certificate. So I know and have the same feeling, and I did it through, and talk to work about it, because until you sit in that cockpit, whether it's a helicopter, helo, or, a propped fixed wing, you don't really understand how much of a risk that is, right? Until you really get in it and feel for yourself. So, it's a tough one, because, the FAA does not allow ADS-B out. Right. For under 55 or any UAS, even the Terros. We have to get the FAA administrator to sign off on an addendum waiver just to get ADS-B out on a 39-foot winged drone, which is kind of hilarious that the FAA doesn't allow that. We're trying to think about how can we give a better understanding to our customers about where the drone would potentially be. But the problem with that, and what we've done in the past, and we learned our lesson with trucks and the crews going around, is we did a setup to where, hey, there's a crew in your area. And what we found is then people would go onto the app, they would track down the crew and go bother them. And not to say we don't think that would happen or people would then try to go after the drone. But I think as we continue, we could do a better understanding of, giving you an idea, say zip codes or, or a better location of where that. Now, I'm guessing the airport is an untowered airport.
The one we fly out, our home port is a tower airport. We actually have two towers. They're mirror imaged airfields right next to each other.
Okay, so with that, on that side, if it was a towered airport, we would have had to apply for a Lance. We would have also had, what we do is we have COAs for all the towered airports. So 15 minutes ahead of time, we contact, the tower manager and we get permission to fly and so forth. But on that side as well, for our circumstance, when we're doing line inspection, which is what you got the text message for, we're also shadow flying the line. We're not even going 400 feet. We might not even be above 75. So we stay very close because we're really looking at the equipment at the top of the pole, so forth. But no, I like the feedback and I appreciate that. And then what's your second question?
Yeah, so along those lines, we could probably talk offline if I can get your contact information, but I would love to see if we could, if one of your representatives wouldn't mind coming out to the base and discussing. I think this is an opportunity, like a PR opportunity for your company and our base to try to increase people's essay, because there's a lot of pilots that have been flying for a really long time that I work with, and their experience with drones and the same situation we just talked about is just very limited. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to discuss some of the things that we can educate the other pilots, but also build some relationships in the community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brent can give out my email to everyone in the class, and you guys, everyone can contact me with questions as well, and I'll get with Brent afterwards on that. But yeah, that's something doable. We have a really good relationship with Homestead Air Force Base. We fly in their class 0 grid almost daily because we have a nuclear plant down there in the flight path or in the pattern. And so, so we definitely like to be a good neighbor and especially on the educational side. So yeah, so we'll touch base afterwards.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Excellent. And next up is Stephen Snyder.
Hey, Eric, thanks for being with us tonight. I very much appreciate this. Just to tag on to what Charles said, North Whiting Field and South Whiting Field, just north of Pensacola, they're, I think, a mile between the two towers. They're mirror, like you said, they're mirror image. One is a fixed wing field, one is helicopters. Several 100,000 flight operations from those two airfields each year. I mean, it's just an immense amount of military training traffic, one of the busiest in the country. So the helicopters, actually, if weather gets bad, you're not flying because of the cloud separations and visibilities. But when they come in special VFR, the helicopters are incredibly low. When they're training out there on the training environment, they have to do engine loss training, auto rotations. So they might just come out of the sky from 1,800 feet down to Charles can tell me what the minimum recovery altitude is now, but it used to be 200 to 300 feet, I think.
300 feet.
300 feet. Thanks. Yeah, it's a former life for me, so I'm gone from there, but it was a great time. I know you guys will do great if you do some peer-to-peer communications afterwards. But specifically, I did some research on UAS in the utility infrastructure a couple of years back. It really interests me. So with you all, you mentioned Skydio, you mentioned Anafi. I have one of each of those here on the shelf, and I like both of them. My relationship with Anafi is not great due to disconnects and some other problems with the aircraft.
Not coming home.
I'll send you my crash report. I'll send you my latest fell out of the sky like it got hit by a hawk crash report, but that goes to customer service, and I didn't receive any, almost to the point where I was ready to call the FAA safety team and file a report. But that's another thing altogether. There's not much service here in the US yet like there is with DJI, and that's one of the reasons you all probably use the product, because the customer support line is fantastic. But for you all, do you see in the future, the way I look at this, everybody was looking at a Matrice 200 now, 310s or whatever, much larger platforms, big zoom cameras, heavy aircraft, you get them in a 3-phase power line. If for some reason you get tied up, now you've really got a big aircraft in the line. But I see the benefit of smaller, more technologically advanced aircraft that now have the ability to zoom, like a Skydio X2E can, do the 100 times zoom and plus thermal zoom. Do you really see us miniaturizing it from a risk perspective and from a just a portability perspective?
We're I don't know how familiar you guys are with the drone in the box kind of side of things from anyone who's researched, but that's where you're at a tipping point for large corporations or programs like FPL to where you are doing so many miles a day and you're paying by the mile, and you get to that point to where you now need to continue to hit that volume and do more, but you're so spread out, across a state like Florida, you have to get to that highly automated beyond visual line of sight. And so what we envision, and you're absolutely correct, right? If you have, say, a triangle framing, so where all 3 phases on distribution are nice and tight, honestly, even a small Anafi or a Skydio could potentially cross phase and cause an outage. Percepto's just announced a smaller drone. Their current drone that we have is 22 pounds. Their smaller one's going to be 9 pounds. But we've started and we've demoed Skydio's drone in the box and, with their X2 and the commercial version. And it's tough because there's still, not to say bigger is always better, but the Skydio can't have a 640 thermal camera. It's just too big and heavy for them. But that's a standard requirement for thermography that our engineers need. And they know that, and we've talked to them and we explain it, and there's no getting around like thermography, just in certain use cases. And so it's a toss up, right? We really like where Skydio is going with their drone in the box and their professional or their commercial grade. And we continue to push them. But I think you'll start to see kind of like a mid-sized, somewhere between 8 to 15 pounds, kind of like the 200s, the 300s and so forth, but a little smaller, easier and more compact. But it's tough. It's, also, with a smaller drone, the wind kills it. And, you try to come in and land autonomously with, just with a QR code. It's not as easy as people think by having some weight behind you, even if it's 5 pounds or so forth, trying to come in on a 22 mile per hour crosswind and, land vertically. So it's, it's something that the industry is going to have to look at. And it's a mix, right? We look at drones as a tool in the toolbox, whether it's manned flights, visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight drone in the boxes, the large scale drone Teros, drive autonomous vehicles one day with LiDAR sensors and scanning versus satellite imagery for near infrared bands and visual. It's going to be a full-fledged, multi-layer approach on how these bigger companies like FPL are going to build out their program, because it's not one size fits all.
And I hate to capitalize on things, but if Dr. T will give me a little bit of latitude, it's a real interesting field to me. I did, in my case study, I looked at that at pole inspections, and 2 persons, whether it's a truck, whether it's someone climbing on a pole, I averaged about 0.6 of an hour is what I came up with, ×2 for a pole inspection. And then there's complications, single phase, 3 phase, how many other utilities are on the pole, cable, fiber, whoever, whether we've got old school copper up there. With a drone, depending on deliverables, and I don't know what you asked from your teams, how many pictures, stills, videos, but about 4 minutes on and off with a capable crew, which adds up to a huge time savings. And these are, again, just my basic research and estimations. I don't know if you could speak to how much you think that this is saved and getting the material off of the second part to this. Only my second question is, how are you guys getting it off the aircraft into the workflow? I know that Perdonalis Electric, they're using PLI. And Mike Bitsko, who runs or PLI itself or created that, it's pretty neat the way I see it come off the aircraft, geotag itself onto the GIS and self-assign the pictures to the pole. So it immediately moves into workflow. I don't know how you guys do that.
No, great. I mean, you're spot on. I mean, we average, depending on whether we're just flying, depending on the mission type, we could say you're only going to take pictures of damage, or we're going to have you take pictures of every pole, 2 pictures, 4 pictures, visual thermal, or for certain business units, we have 11 pictures, 10 visual and 1 thermal, and they have to hit certain spots. But on average, it's 3 to 5 minutes a pole. So I was very impressed. And, you're talking about it's mandatory 2-person team. One is doing the flying and one is the visual observer. Not one's flying and one's the cameraman. You need a full-time visual observer for multiple reasons: for safety, to look to make sure the pilot's not going to fly into something they don't see, and also for deconfliction on the ground, for when people potentially want to come up and chit chat to you or yell at you or complain at you. So it's a mandatory 2-person team, but yeah, on average it's 3 to 5 minutes. And so that's pretty impressive, number on your end to get at 4. And it's tough. We average, depending on how close the poles are, what type of environment, whether it's suburban, urban, city, or so forth, we're averaging anywhere from 8 to 10 miles a day from one of our teams. Depending on where they have to park, it's all sorts of, and it can go, but they're out there cooking. And people don't realize how hard of a job it really is to do that and do it consistently day in and day out. And then their second question is, we have our own internal, what we call condition assessment program. It's been around for years, from when we did driving walking patrols. So what happens is that at the end of the day, the pilot comes in and they will upload their pictures into our AWS cloud. And from there, it'll get filtered away. And we have subject matter experts that review all the images. And then they will then put them into our condition assessment. It's very similar to yours. They'll look at the geocoding. They'll see if there's a picture with a damage or something. They then assign it to that pole in our GIS system, and then it goes into our work management system to do a work order and so forth. It's difficult on our end to take other people's products, like Precision Hawk has Precision Analytics, or Measure has a product. A lot of people have some really cool products that will automatically assign, and snap it to. But the problem is we have our own secure work management system that we've developed internally for our workers. And it's tough to make them, even through APIs, chit chat and work with each other. So it's something we continue to look at long term. But for the most part, it's just through AWS cloud.
And here, I just blanked out for a second. Do your pilots themselves, do they have the ability to go out on a pole and say, hey, here's something in the primary. We've got vegetation in the primary, and actually say that it's a green, amber, or a red. That way, by the time it gets to your engineering team for a second tier analysis, they've already got something sort of bookmarked so that they can look at that a little closer.
Yep. We train all of our pilots on our condition assessments, and we do a 1, 3, or 5. 5 being immediate, needs to be worked. 3 is it's on its way out. 1 is it's starting, not to say fail, but it doesn't look perfect, or it's not the standard. And so based on that 1, 3, or 5, we know how to prioritize what we're looking at.
And then because you've got the engineers that are looking at it, you can dispatch your teams, obviously, with the right parts to the right pole at the right time, schedule it in your workflow. When I talked to Eric down at Perdonalis a couple of years ago, he said, Steve, he says, everybody was worried that we're putting people out of work. We're doing all this with drones. He says, in reality, we've hired more linemen. We've become more effective, and we were able to show the front office about $1 billion worth of savings if we take into account the SADI and SAFI indexes. And you can explain that if you want to, because you'll be better at it than I am.
Now you're throwing out real utility acronyms.
Yeah, there's actually a cost assigned to all those minutes of outages times customers. But what's interesting here too is, I'm in rural West Virginia. Between my farm and my neighbors, I can see his house, but it's 2 miles away. Well, the line that feeds my house feeds his. Well, you have to go through 8 gates and through a bunch of really muddy pastures. A UAS is really the only way to effectively do that. And, our average age of poles in this small sector is about 1952. It's kind of become an on-condition sort of replacement, which is the kind of things that set the world on fire. I think somebody mentioned Paradise earlier. Bad things do happen if you don't keep up with the infrastructure, which is a whole paper in itself. I don't know what the average age of your equipment is out there on the transmission and distribution.
Yeah, no. So high level, you're absolutely correct. Our problem is, you look at O&M versus capital expenditures, right? You try to eliminate as much O&M as possible, or tie the O&M cost of replacing a piece of equipment to a capital job so you can capitalize as much as possible. With that, you're absolutely correct. What we're seeing with drones is more opportunity to fix stuff, but also on that side, if you know about it from a legal standpoint and you don't fix it, it's even worse, right? So it's a double-edged sword, to where you are creating much more work, but also the type of work that you're creating, and how can you, accounting purpose side, tie it to capital jobs, to make more capital percentage versus O&M. And just to let you on our end, this year will be 100% out of the wood pole business for transmission lines. We have over 7,000 miles of transmission lines that are either steel or composite concrete for transmission. Then for our distribution program, we have a big, what's called hardening. By 2024, we will have hardened and changed out and made our main lines, say the main roads off of 95 and the turnpike, those main lines, we will have made them all be able to meet 150 plus mile per hour winds. So FPL, since the 04-05, debacle of, all those hurricanes, we've really reimagined the way we do business for what's called storm secure. And you've got a lot of utilities across the country and world copying our hardening program for that kind of stuff.
I lived in Clearwater in 04 and 05. I remember it very well. There was a tree on our house. The power was out while I was a Coast Guard guy, so I was out doing my thing. Wife was home.
04-05, I was in Orlando at UCF, and I had every single one of them cross the Central Florida. So
it sure did. So when it sounds like you got contractors, you got in-house work and everything else. Safety management systems, how many of the pilots you actually training inside and operating 107, and how many are contractors, and how big is the safety management system? I would assume pretty robust.
Right there, okay. Hi. Sorry, my son's coming to say hi. Hey, I'm almost done, and I'll be out there to play with you, okay?
One more minute. It is time for me to shut up and go away.
Hey. He's actually a really good drone pilot. So
good.
So Cammy, I'll let you sit on my lap after, okay? I'm almost done, Cam. So, okay, if you want to sit on my lap, you gotta be quiet, okay? You gotta be quiet. Okay, go on the bed. So, no, that's a great question, and we, of course, like everyone else, 107 is a requirement. We train and have a ground school, which is 2 days, and a flight school, which is 3 days for all internal company pilots. With that, that's just to fly, say, an Anafi, a Phantom, a Mavic, a Skydio. If you want to go to an M210, a 310, or something else, that's an additional school. Nighttime flying, additional. Flight over people, which we have waivers for, additional. BVLOS school for our waivers, additional 5 days. Now, for our vendors, we require and we do a half-day safety course with them, a risk assessment management course. So just like the SORA, for manned aircraft for risk mitigation and the checklist, we have a automatic checklist in Excel that you cannot click. It's not allowing, it takes the human out of it. And it says, based upon what you're flying, where you're flying, how you're flying, what's in your area, location, weather, so forth. You're going to pick yellow, red, or green, and each one has a score. And if you get above a certain score at the end, it then, hold on one second. Sorry, guys. So with that, we have our own risk matrix that we require every pilot before every mission fills out this risk matrix. It's going to say, how many landing zones are you going to do? You are required to send in a KML with your entire flight GPS area. So we're deconflicting from one drone flight or mission to another as well. And we've had to deconflict as well a few times. And this is all done before they even go out into the field, before we even approve the mission. And so, as you can imagine, we're doing, 30 missions a day, pretty much. It's busy for my team. I mean, you think about, like, we're in air traffic control. Half of that group is ATC for drones. And, no one can take off or land, initially without our permission and without the approval. And so we use a few different apps to track. All of our vendors have air data. And so if they go over 400 feet, we get a ding, right? We've got battery and all sorts of other stuff. And then on top of that, we use a few different apps like T-Sheets and Salesforce for scheduling approvals and tracking and checking in and checking out as well, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. But, safety is our number one concern. And, they have to close out their missions at the end of the day in the app. We have to know that they've gotten home okay. And, there's a lot of stuff that goes into planning, and people don't realize, right? Initially, it's, oh, let's go out and let's throw this drone up in the air and go fly. But, when you get into detailed and these sport, of course, like very expensive UAs, but on top of that, it's a safety aspect too, and understanding and having the pilot do that pre-flight assessment the day before or 2 days before to really know, hey, I'm going to be flying next to a prison. I have to call the prison, right? I'm going to be requesting a lance, or I'm going to be flying, or I need to go through this gated property. So I should probably call the property management team or the company or so forth. And so it's really helped streamline and make sure there's less cancellations and push outs. But it also, on that risk assessment, it has everything from trees to, and then once they get on site, they have to do a separate part for pre-flight checklist, right? And then they do a post-flight checklist. So we followed, the SORA and also what manned aviation does with checklists very carefully, but with also a number scheme and a risk score. And if it's 200 plus, you could still fly. It just has to get approved by me, or, and it comes all the way up the chain. And that's what we make sure they understand, is that it's not there to not let you fly. It's there to make you aware of your issues that potentially could become safety concerns, and how would you mitigate them. So it's, great question.
Hey, Eric, we have one last question, and then we'll let you get to family time. And we really do appreciate you being here with us. The last question is coming from Jorge. If you want to go ahead and ask, and then, we'll try to keep this as brief as we can.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Eric. I'm Jorge. Just a really brief background. I'm going into my second year with working with Textron Systems. I'm specifically working program management, supporting Shadow under the hardware team. So, like I said, almost 2 years. I graduated from Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach campus. The question I was going to ask was, what do you think is the biggest challenge that FPLAir is going to have in the upcoming years? At least that you think is the biggest challenge.
No, great question. There's two parts. One is, company like, say, a utility, that's not to say it's a technology company, but, the point of a utility is to provide power, right? We're not, what we've built here is never been done, right? It's a drone program or a drone outfit inside a utility. So number one, as you working at Textron, upper management CEOs, presidents, they have expectations, right? And how do you help continue to hit those expectations while on top of it, creating and moving along at the snail pace that the federal government allows you to, right? With beyond visual line of sight, with waivers, and what we're doing. And I'm sure, and I know the shadow, what that program pretty well, because, 3 years ago, we looked at Textron for a few of their VTOLs and some other stuff as they were taking them off from DoD to, try to commercialize them. And, on our end, it's twofold. It's, we have to build out a business case for the ratepayers, right? Because that's where we get our money from every 4 years. We go to the Public Service Commission, we get our standard rate for the 4 years, and that's our budget. And we always have to meet that or, exceed it, meaning come below it. And so on drones, right, it's tough because we're pushing the limits with highly automated beyond visual line of sight. And, image recognition is going to be a key, over the next year to, 3 to 5 years. And that, I think, if imminent recognition change detection fails, you will start to see the drone industry on the commercial side trail down, because you're going to get so big. One mission over a circuit of 8 to 10 miles could capture up to 1,500 images. And imagine trying to do that, 30 times a day to 50, 100 times a day. Now you've got manually all these people that have to sit in the back office and view 1,500 images. It sucks. You're not going to be able to do it and keep up with that. So I think, and it's not going to happen this year, but over the next 3 years, image recognition really needs to, machine learning, artificial intelligence really needs to come in and be able to take over to reduce that haystack to find the needle.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a big one. And we've been working on it for about 3 years now, and it's still not ready. So.
No, that's interesting. Hey, I appreciate you answering that. And I just wanted to say the part that you mentioned with, what y'all did to kind of assess people's reaction and getting their feedback. I think that's a really good idea. I mean, it sounds like so simple. Once you explained it, I'm like, oh, that makes that's common sense, right? I feel like everyone should do kind of similar to what your company did with kind of getting the public's opinions and, what is the most appropriate text message to send out. So I think that is a very smart, and like I said, it sounds like such a common, simple way to do it, but clearly there's not a lot of companies out there that aren't taking the time to get the public's opinions and their perspective. So, but yeah, hey, I appreciate you answering my question, and pleasure to meet you.
No, thank you.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective and really bringing a new dimension to what it is that we're studying and examining as a collective whole here at Embry-Riddle. Class for
my pleasure. And Brent, don't forget, you can share my email, and more than welcome to follow up with any questions or stay in touch with any of the students.
Outstanding. Class, to receive credit for this week, as with the last couple sessions, you need to submit a brief discussion post. Specifically for UNSY 501, this is going to replace Module 9's future uses discussion. For UNSY 502, it replaces inspiring future missions. As you do develop your brief entries, consider how FPL and Eric are enabling technological advancement and our understanding of the capabilities, performance, and challenges that surround UNSY and UAS specifically. So, thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and look forward to seeing you all in class.